Mr. Affleck has just arrived.
Hi, George, are you there? Come and say hello.
Hey, everybody, how's it going?
Very good. Just give me 1 second, George. Welcome.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Nice to be here.
Not Ben, huh? I was expecting Ben there for a minute.
My evil twin.
Ben
No?
Affleck. Well, I had mentioned I was going to try to get a celebrity. I actually have been trying to get a hold of Rick Mercer and haven't had any luck.
He's enjoying retirement, I think.
Well, he's still got his website up and it still says, come and see me or come and send me an email or whatever.
Destination Canada just pulled him out of retirement for a travel-based rant to encourage Canadians to travel domestically. So he's there for a price, I think.
But I told him we're all unemployed tour guides and drivers, so maybe he'll be interested. George, it worked out well this morning because we recently had a Zoom link change, and I inadvertently sent everyone the wrong link out there. So we hope your other meeting is all taken care of. Okay, I know you're a popular guy.
Just I'm going to mute everybody. George and Jeff, I'll unmute you, and then we'll go from there. So okay,
sounds good.
There we go.
Okay. I just unmuted myself. Is that all right, Matthew?
All good. Yeah, all good to go.
Okay. So, George, welcome. We've seen you so much on TV, especially recently. We feel like we know you. I'm glad that you're able to comment. I was very, very sorry that you stepped aside for the last election. It's too bad you weren't there, but let's get to that slowly. Well, George,
sure.
George, first tell us where were you born, George?
Well, I was born in North Vancouver at Lionsgate Hospital way back in 1964, and we lived in North Van until I was about 10, and then we moved to Langley, and I grew up in Langley and then White Rock, and then moved to Vancouver on my own. And during Expo, moved here for Expo and worked at the BC Pavilion, and I was a tourism officer at the BC Pavilion. So I'm very familiar with tourism and the province, and that's how I got in communications, really.
Did you do you live now in Vancouver, or did you do that as you started to run for council, or?
I live in Yaletown. I've lived in this place in Yaletown for 20 years. Before that, I was in Commercial Drive and then the West End. So I've been in Vancouver since '86. Besides some travel in between here and there for years, a year here and a year there. But for the most part, have made downtown Vancouver my home.
Yeah, well, I was born and raised in the West End, and the background behind me is Falls Creek South, where I live now. So I'm opposite you. Yeah.
I'm very familiar with Falls Creek South. I was part of the committee on that for council. So.
Yeah, well, which part? Because of course they started to properly redevelop it in the mid-70s, and
I'm not that old.
I know you would have been about 10 or something.
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
So, well, tell us just a little bit about when you were out of high school. What did you get into, and how did that? Did you go to postgraduate, and how eventually did you get into council? Like, what did you do just before you were working for council? Were you just doing the average kind of things a lot of young people do, and then one thing leads to another and you ended up in politics?
Kind of. I mean, I've had a sort of a meandering life a little bit. Growing up in Langley, I wasn't ready for university yet, so I applied for the Rotary Student Exchange, and then ended up going to Denmark for a year after high school. So I lived in Denmark, learned Danish, did that for a year, and then came home and started university and did 2 years of business administration. And then Expo came along, and I had also been working at Pizza Hut and Mr. Mike's full-time while being a student. So I was working in the restaurant world and being a student. And then I got a job at Expo, which was a huge opportunity. I was 21 years old. So perfect age to be having a crazy time at Expo. And it was a crazy time and fun. So I did that and then finished Expo, and they gave us a massive amount of money at the end, $1,200 as a bonus for staying to the very end. So I hopped a ride, went across Canada, and then went to Europe again and spent about a year and a half in Europe, traveling, hitchhiking, I lived in Israel and Egypt, lived in Greece. I lived in England, in the south of England on an island, working at a pub and then a betting shop in the mornings. And then in Israel, I picked tomatoes. And then met a person who would become my future wife, now ex-wife, who was Swedish. I met her in Greece on Crete. And so we traveled to Turkey and traveled together. And then and then we ended up she came back here and came back to university, and she's an artist. She has a goldsmith shop on Granville Island. And so we were together 20 years, and then things happened. We had 2 kids and got divorced. And in the meantime, when I finished university, I ended up working, I had a degree. I switched to English Lit as a degree from business because I felt they were trying to make me an accountant and I wanted to be an entrepreneur. So I switched to English Lit to just have fun at university. And then a degree in English literature is not very helpful to getting a job. So yeah, choice, you become a teacher or you go into journalism. And so I chose journalism, went to journalism school for a year at Langara, and then got a job at CBC and worked at CBC Radio for a long time, for most of the 90s, where I had the opportunity to travel around the province, working for the morning shows up in Prince George and Kelowna and Prince Rupert. And so I spent about 7 years at CBC traveling, and then as a producer and a documentary maker, and then eventually ended up in the music department doing music documentaries. And then we ended up moving to Sweden for a while, my now ex-wife, and lived there for a while. And then I came back and decided to open my business, kind of. It was a little bit of a process towards that, but I have a marketing company that I launched in 2000. And that came about kind of by accident in some ways. I had 2 business partners at the start. Yeah.
Wow. Sorry, sometimes, George, if you hear a voice in my background, it's my wife is home from the care facility. She has early onset dementia. I took her out of there 3 months ago. Sometimes she just comments. She said, "Oh, what happened?"
Yeah, well, no worries. I work. So I'm rambling on here.
It's. I was just going to say how interesting it is of all the guest speakers we've had over the last roughly 14 weeks. We've had about 11 or 12 guest speakers, and quite a few of them have mentioned the time that they worked at Expo, how Expo came along and it led to this job or that job, and then other things happen and it leads elsewhere. Because I was going to ask you about the company you started. It's Curve. Is it called Curve Communications?
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
So
I left one of my other notes in the other room. But is that the marketing company you were talking about a moment ago?
That's right. So I launched my agency in 2000 with 2 partners, Laura Balance and Dwayne Lenny. And Dwayne, his marriage fell apart in the first few months, and it was his impetus. He actually pushed us to launch this agency because we had been working together. I'd left journalism, it was kind of floating around in public relations, and had been writing a history book of newspapers for the Newspaper Association. And so I did that, but at the same time I was doing some PR. And then Dwayne and Laura and I said, "Hey, let's launch a business." Yeah, great idea. Let's do it. Then within 6 months, Dwayne was gone, and it was just Laura and I, and we were together 8 years, and I bought her out. I bought that out in 2008. So I bought her out in 2008. And since then I've owned the company. So I've done the agency, and I continue to have the agency, and I ran the agency while I was in politics. Politics really happened by accident. It was all, I'm a very big fan of lists and putting your life goals and what you want to achieve in your life, and what do you want to do with your, all of your things in life. So running for office was on my list. And so I had been very involved with my kids' school. I was on the PAC. I was the chair of the PAC for a long time in South Falls Creek at Falls Creek Elementary. And so I thought, maybe I could, I've done this for 4 or 5 years. Maybe I'll see if I can run for school board. And so I approached the MPA, and Suzanne Anton met with me, and she was the presumed mayoral candidate. And I said, "Oh yeah, I think, school board." She said, no, after a conversation, no, not school board. I'm like, "What?" no, I want you to run for council with me. I'm like, I don't know. I'm like, I got a business to run. It sounds like a lot of work. It'll be fine. It'll be fine. Don't worry about it. We'll make it work. We'll make it work. And so I said, oh, okay. After much conversation, thought, I said, okay, well, what the heck? And so I ran, and then she lost, and almost everybody else lost in my party. And it was me and Elizabeth Ball were the only two who won. And so suddenly the party I had just joined a few months earlier, I'd never been a member of a political party before. I was suddenly the face of this party, and I was like, okay, now I'm the face of a political party. Alrighty then. So I just, and because I have a background in communications and journalism and a little theater mixed in there, that's basically the core needs of a politician: theater, research, and understanding how to manage media. So I did that.
Well, there's always talk on the radio. I thought this as a kid growing up in the West End. You stand a good chance of winning on park or council, especially if your name is in the top 10 letters and your name starts with A. And Suzanne Anton lost because it was the mayoralty chair at the time, and that's a different ball of wax. You've only got 2 or 3 candidates, and the city either votes the other. But do you think you and Elizabeth Ball made it because your last names start with A and B? Do you subscribe at all to that theory that you do
a little bit?
Chance?
I would give it about a 1% bump for sure. Although RJ Aquino, who was running with Cope, I think, didn't win, and so he was second on the ballot and has run a few times and has never won. So for me, what was Suzanne provided? I own a marketing company, so I know how to market. So she gave me the liberty to do what I wanted in my own campaign, or any candidate for that matter. Elizabeth and I both raised the most money of all the candidates, so we spent the most money on our marketing. And I know how to do marketing. I'd been doing it by that point for 11 years, so I knew exactly what I needed to do. And so if you looked at the polling that we were doing during that campaign in 2011, you could see that I didn't exist in anybody's minds. The election was November 15th, I think, approximately, and then my ad campaign and PR campaign began around October 15th. So I had a 4-week strategy, and I didn't exist in any polling. And then suddenly, when I started my campaign, their polling, I said it popped up in their polling that they were doing the party's polling, and they were like, "What the heck? They didn't really pay attention to what I was doing, but I was doing a whole bunch of advertising and social media stuff. And then by the end of the campaign, I was the #1 candidate in the polling that we were getting, and I didn't know this until after I had run that they gave me all this data. And it was weird because it all made sense when I realized when Suzanne started coming out and hanging out with me a lot. And I was like, why are you hanging out with me a lot? I'm just kind of knocking on doors, doing my thing. And she was, always wanting to hang out with me. And I'm like, oh, okay. But turns out she thought she could, I don't know, get that might help her with her poll. I don't know. It's like, generally that's not how marketing works. But so in the end I won, and I felt confident that I would win because of my approach. I was very strategic in my approach. I sent out, I don't know how many, 10,000 leaflets to Yaletown, and it said, I live in Yaletown, vote for me. This is a very slightly right-of-center neighborhood, so I got a big bump there. And in the Falls Creek neighborhood, if you look at the polling, I work in the South Falls Creek area with my work at the school, I was very well known down there by parents. And so even though a lot of people who live in South Falls Creek, they lean to the left, they knew me and trusted me, and so they spread the word and said and voted for me. So it was a mixture. So I defend my approach and deny a little bit the alphabetical approach. I think it helps a little bit, but a good campaign is what really gets you in the door there, I think.
Well, I remember Suzanne Anton coming to a couple of things where I happened to be at and so on, and she was pretty good with I have to say that Kennedy Stewart showed up at a function I go to every year on Remembrance Day for the veterans. And he not only came to the Victory Square, but he came to the Legion that we take the veterans to. But I remember Suzanne Anton doing that. She showed up, and it was like a caper, right? And I was really sorry that she didn't win that election where she ran for mayor, but she later went on to become in the government, right? The Liberal government. She was
Attorney
the
General, yeah.
Attorney General for a while, so that was good.
Mhm.
Now, how much pressure? First of all, I wanted to back up a second about the alphabet. I thought that was a good idea to mix the ballot up so it wasn't alphabetical the last civic election. Do you think that was a good idea?
Not really. I mean, I think that more crucially, and I was denied this amendment by Vision, was to take the political parties off of the ballot. And I said, if you don't want political party power in the city, then, and you're worried about the system being gamed by partisan politics, then take the parties off the ballot. And that was denied by Vision Vancouver, and I found that ironic because they were always arguing about, you know, partisan and political parties and blah blah blah. So they didn't allow that. The name thing, it actually is a real problem for people who have seniors, for example, have a real challenge with a mixed ballot. Finding names when a ballot has over 100 names on it and it's not alphabetical, it's very, very challenging. And I think that can create a lot of confusion. I think you look at it as an example, you know, no disrespect to Rebecca Bly, who won. I think there were a lot of people who got her confused with Sarah Blythe, and she got a lot of votes from the bump because she was further up the ballot. Yeah, it's always this challenge, but I think the alphabetical ballot is actually works fine. I think it's more about the campaign, and you know, I think voters are smarter than that. I really think it's disrespectful to voters to think that they're so dumb that they just go in there and go A, B, C, D, E, F, G. They just don't. They don't. They do political parties first, and then they go to second choices, maybe random stuff. But there's no proof to the fact that in Vancouver, you know, and it's almost coincidental. And if you look at actually historical data across this province, the majority of people who get elected, their last letter actually starts in the middle of the alphabet over the last 30 years. So I don't know. It's something to get obsessed about, but I think at the end of the day, if you work hard, you run a good campaign, you connect, you have a good history in the community, you have a good chance of winning. And I ticked all those boxes. I feel I was very involved I was on the chair of the comedy festival. I was on the board of the children's festival. I was the chair of the PAC. I was on the car co-op board as chair. I was very involved in my community in many ways, and also knew how to market, and was with a political party that was, you know, had a great history. So all those things come together.
Well, of course, this begs the other question that someone else on chat just asked me, and I was just going to ask you that anyways, was your feeling on the famous voter at large or ward system for the city of Vancouver, which apparently it had decades and decades ago. But what do you think about that?
I'm not a big fan of the ward system. I said I'm open to a mixed system where you have wards and at large. The challenge that I believe you create with a ward system is the elected councillors stop thinking about the city as a whole. They look at their neighborhood and that's all they care about, and they only champion their neighborhood, and it has the opportunity to be ripe for corruption. And I think you see that in other cities, that there is these negotiations that happen with councillors in their neighborhood. There's no holistic look, you know, look at the city and how do we build our city as a whole. It's not that complicated to get around Vancouver. I never felt overwhelmed getting around Vancouver. It's not that big of a city. You know, Southeast Vancouver is about 20-minute drive, you know. Yeah, if you're taking your bike, it might be a bit farther, but it's possible. I've ridden back over there. So I don't believe it's an effective approach to governance. I think it's a cop-out for people who feel like that City Hall is not being fair. Now, if you want to ask about the City Hall being fair and being having better governance, absolutely, there's work to be done, and I was a champion for that when I was in office, when it related to how things were being spun, the communications department being massively increased from a few people to over 40 people. You know, there's this arrogance of governance that is not uncommon when the party's in power for so long, but there was this arrogance right out of the gate with Vision, and I think this distrust of City Hall in Vancouver is deeply embedded now, and it's going to be very, very challenging to turn that around. And those are things that to me are more important than a ward system. Ward system won't solve that. good governance in general, I think will solve a lot of that. And I think that's what's missing in Vancouver and has been for a long, long time.
Okay, so tell me this. I was at a tourism breakfast once back when Premier Campbell, now, you know, Campbell had been on council and he was the mayor. And he gave this great speech once about how when he was on council, it didn't matter what the issue was. Everybody, all the councillors and the mayor all got the booklets with the information in it, you know, whether it was city staff or whatever the information was, they all had it. But he said, when you look at something like a premiership or a prime ministership, it's really only, in the case of a BC government, for example, he said, the cabinet might be 20 people in the cabinet room, but there's only maybe 6 really key players. You know, the real big mover and shakers, the premier, the finance minister, and a couple of other people who are probably really strong, you know, people who could easily be the premier themselves if the other guy didn't win it, right? And the same with the prime minister. You know, there's 300 and so many seats, but the government is, you know, maybe 150, 170 seats, but the cabinet's down to about 40 people. And in that 40 people, there's maybe, again, 10 people. And he said he wished there was a way that he liked at City Council, the councillors and the mayor, all 10 of the councillors and the mayor, everyone had all the same information on whatever the topic was. Is that what you found when you were at City Hall? It didn't matter if you were Vision or NPA. You guys all got the same information about issues you needed to discuss. Is that right?
Yes and no. I mean, I think there was intentional lack of, you know, the financial side would be an example where I requested on many times and voted against every single budget because I always felt they weren't providing me with all the information that I needed in enough time, and the reporting itself was inadequate in my mind. You know, they certainly didn't put me on any committees of any form, really. They didn't want me too engaged, so that was intentional. You know, it's you know, I didn't. They made it very difficult for me to access certain staff people when I wanted to. You know, there was definitely an implied or a strategic approach to keep me, certainly me, out of the loop as much as they could. And they were always surprised by sometimes I would learn things and then find out, bring a motion to council, and they didn't know how I knew this. And sometimes it was just a coincidence. But no, I think that unfortunately for the time I was there and the term before that was Suzanne was, you know, basically under Vision Vancouver. And if you're a Vision supporter, I apologize in advance, but they had a style that I think was intentionally apprehensive about being clear and communicative, and ironically, given how much money and time and staff they put in the department. So, you know, I think that it led to the cynicism that we're seeing today that is higher than it ever has been in Vancouver, and I think that's unfortunate.
Well, how much pressure were you under, by the way, when you announced? I was not happy that you announced you were not going to run for council, and I thought, oh man. And of course, how much pressure were you under to run for the mayor?
I don't think the party particularly were big fans of me, to be honest, ever, because I never really, I was quite independent in my approach to my role. I wasn't a long-term member of this party, you know, and I think that they found that frustrating to a certain degree, some people who were behind the scenes. So I think they were pretty happy that I wasn't. A lot of people within the party were pretty happy that I wasn't running, because they didn't like me. And so that wasn't hard. My decision was made based on a whole bunch of things, and it wasn't the right time for me. And, you know, young family. You know, my youngest now is 12, so, you know, he had never seen me not in politics, and it was, you know, you spent a lot of nights at council, and I kind of saw, I don't know if you follow council now, I could sort of see the chaos that we're seeing coming, and I didn't really feel that I wanted to be a part of that sort of negative atmosphere.
Well, just so
it's
you
not good for your health.
Yeah, just so you know, I went through the BCIT broadcast program in the late 70s, and I worked in radio, both as a host and all kinds of stuff. And then the newsroom was expanding, and I did news reporting, and I had done some of that actually for CFRO, Co-op Radio, back in the mid 70s. I learned some stuff there when they were still down at Pigeon Park and such. And one of my least favorite assignments was to have to go to City Hall because, oh my God, the meetings were so long. And I started to realize then, wow, the councilors and the mayor really do have a lot of stuff. You know, remember one time I saw former Mayor Campbell, not Gordon Campbell, the other Campbell. You know, he had a book that was like, 2 feet thick. He was lugging that around, and he stopped to say hello to us. So I know the work that city councilors do. And so you did, when you said you worked for the CBC and did for radio around the province and so on, you weren't just in the studio or in the newsroom, you were out reporting, right?
Yeah, really covering almost every corner of the province for the morning show. So I would go in these get out in the old CBC car, and I would drive off into wherever, northeast, Fort St. John or Terrace or wherever, and it was cool because having been a tourism person at Expo, where I was required to memorize all the parts of the province, and people would come up to I worked at the BC Pavilion, and when you walked in the BC Pavilion, there was the tourism thing at this entrance, and so people would come there from all over the world asking us where they should go, and you have to learn how to read a map upside down and show them all the amazing things and give them brochures, internet. So I knew a lot about the province, about every corner of the province from a tourism point of view. So for me to work as a journalist and travel and actually be in these regions and see it on the ground for a few years on and off, it was fascinating for me. And it was interesting to see the different kinds of personalities across the province, the openness. Having been a city boy for a long time, you really see how when you go to Nelson or Prince George, when people say hello to you on the street, you're like, oh, what? But it's just normal there. And so it was cool. And it was a great opportunity, and the money was terrible, but it was a great experience.
So you worked at you did the traveling around the province for CBC before Expo or after Expo?
After. So that would have been from 92 to about 98, 99, somewhere in there.
So quick question, if you know the answer, since you aren't that far removed from being on Vancouver City Council, the old BC Pavilion at the old Expo 86 site. I know there's some redevelopment signs up there right now, a couple new residential towers and so on. But is the old BC Pavilion building going to be saved that you're aware of, or it'll come down?
It's coming down.
Okay.
Yeah. Even though it's a legacy building, its legacy only lasted till now. So
yeah. Well, and any thoughts on the old those of you who know what I'm talking about, out at the P&E for many years, and it's been in storage for a long time now, the BC map, the Challenger Relief Map. Any thoughts on that?
Well, the P&E was a client of mine for years with Laura Balance. Laura still has it as a client. So you mean Laura Balance? She's always their spokesperson, and she was my partner in business. And it was always a question that came up. And there's just really it's a huge piece of real estate to put that thing out. We did have it out one year, I think, if I recall, in the early 2000s. I can't remember. It was brought out again, but it was pretty cool. I remember going to see it and walking over it, and it's unfortunate, but it does take a lot of space, and it's just that space is just not available.
Yeah, I know that about 15 or so years ago ish. You remember the old BC Transportation Museum that was out there in Surrey? There were all kinds of old trucks and buses and cars, and
South Surrey or?
Well,
South
it was
Surrey,
in
right?
Cloverdale.
Oh, okay. Yeah, sure.
It was kind of, I think it was known as the BC Trucking Museum, but it had a lot of cars and so on. I don't know if you've been to the newer, that's about 10 years old now. I'm just trying to think. LeMay's Classic Automobile Museum in Tacoma, Washington. It's about a stone's throw from the Tacoma Dome. A comedian, Jay Leno.
Oh, yeah. No, I've been there.
Yeah. Well,
That's right there. I've been to the restaurant there. Yeah.
we have such an array of classic cars here, buses and trucks. And 10 or 15 years ago, you must know Alan Edwards, who used to be on BCTV Global.
Yeah, he was
He's
at CBC when I was there, actually. He was first at CBC, yeah.
And he's a car enthusiast.
Yeah.
A lot of people, if they could, if there was a way to get money together and build a museum with cars, trucks, and I'm thinking if you could add that map, you know, this would be a big draw. This would be a big tourism draw. People come to see the classic cars, trucks, buses, and then discover, oh, and there's this magnificent 900,000 pieces of map that was done by this guy, George Challenger. I'm really mentioning that to you in the hopes that if there's ever anything that somehow in a discussion you're in comes up, I know for a fact this would be a big thing. Of course, location is important too. It would have to be somewhere probably not too far removed from downtown, because the tourists who, and I'm a frontline worker, and I know that a lot of tourists are older and, well, where's this thing? How do I get to it? Well, you just jump on the SkyTrain, or it's a 5-minute cab ride or a 10-minute cab ride, this kind of thing. You know, it's too bad some of the site at the old Great Northern Way, which I know Finning gave over to SFU, UBC, Emily Carr. That would have been a great area for a thing like that. But anyway, that's just my thinking out loud in passing.
Yeah, no, having been a part of that process, and I exactly know where they hide it all. It's all under the bleachers at the Coliseum. There is a design that I believe I saw once that had where you put it under a glass, basically glass ceiling really on top of it. You'd be able to walk over it, and it would just be a floor that would be glass, and you'd walk over it and it would be part of a building, and you'd be able to see it through the glass. And that's an interesting design, because then you're not using up a lot of space except for what's underneath. The car idea is a great mix. So, it's unfortunate that they couldn't have found a way in the new convention center as a location that could have fit in there. But the Peony grounds, which are a city asset and not park board asset, there's lots of opportunity for out there. And unfortunately, it moves very slow. There's never been real, because the neighbors are quite vocal. They're always apprehensive about doing stuff out there. But I think on the north east side of the site, there's lots where playland is slowly going to migrate down to. I think there's lots of opportunity down there that's less offensive to the neighborhood, and that could be something that if they were to build some sort of convention facility down there and include the Challenger map, I think that would be really cool.
All right, before I open the floor up to some of the other members, your thoughts on sort of the predicament the city is in. Money is tight with the COVID thing came along and stopped a lot of normal revenue and so on. I know we don't have a virus or a cure yet and this kind of thing, but I guess it's pretty tough. I wouldn't want to be the mayor or the premier or the prime minister right now, right? But just your thoughts on the whole thing. Now it's July 21st today, so we've got a little more of a better picture than we had even a month ago about where things seem to be headed. But what do you see things?
Well, it's all financial at this point, and I think unfortunately, the indecisiveness of the council in Vancouver was slow at making some decisions on where to save early on, which would have been less impactful, because you don't want to start cutting when things are coming back in government. You want to try and inject something into the economy, not to have to start cutting back. And unfortunately, because they didn't really find ways to cut and lay off people quickly, they are now in a situation where they have a very high payroll, and they keep adding more things as far as projects to the city. And you look at the motions that are coming to council, even still, you're like, are you guys living in some kind of fantasy land? You have no money for any of these ideas. So stop coming up with your pet projects and focus on the basic core principles that are required as a city. But this council seems incapable of doing that. So I think they're very challenged, but the government has, and the charter, Vancouver is unique. We have the charter of our own charter. So we have a lot of flexibility. We own the most property of anybody in the city. So we have a lot of assets that we can use or leverage. With our credit rating very high, we can borrow a lot of money if we have to on the back of that. So I think the challenge the city will have is, the capital budget more than the operating. I think that there's they're going to have bigger trouble reaching some of their goals because they're not getting the capital funding that they thought they would get through development that they was expected. There was a few years there where we were getting 150, $200 million a year, in CACs and ridiculous amounts of money that were coming into the capital budget. So they have a lot of challenges, and I don't see any conversation or plan for that. I think staff are doing it. I mean, I know some senior staff people, and I know there's some great competent staff there. So I know that they're putting a plan together that they'll present to and have partially presented already. So I think that there'll be a way out of this, but I think the challenge will be, and as a small business owner, the city has done really nothing for me since this happened. The provincial and federal, mostly the federal government, have helped small business, but Vancouver, who has 90% of the businesses in the city are small business, the city itself has done nothing for small business at all that I've seen, and that's unfortunate because that's the engine of our city. And I just don't see anything happening, including tourism operators and all these things. Like what are you doing for them? We've had a tax reduction partly, but that was decided before all of this. So.
Okay, there was just something in the distance beyond my iPad. There's a TV on, and the headlines are scrolling across the bottom. And I was just waiting for this something about somebody's just approved $680 million, and I can't remember the rest of it, whether it's the federal government for the cities, but it'll come up again. Does anyone else have a question they wanted to ask George?
I see there's a couple in the chat section there. I can address those if you want.
Sure.
Gregor's running I think it's a green company related to green concrete, I believe. He's the CEO of a green concrete company. So he's doing that now. Mixed ward system, yeah, that's sort of one of the 5x5 is kind of one model that I talked about, where you have 5 wards and 5 at-large councillors. That might solve some of the concerns and address, knowing that we have at least 5 people fighting for the city as a whole, and then 5 people fighting for 5 neighborhoods, or increase the size of council. 10 councillors in the city this large is not a lot. And then I think that's pretty much it on those questions. So yeah, anything else?
Let's just see here. I'll just check the industry. Tourism industry seeks $680 million in COVID-19 stimulus funding. Yeah, we're interesting story that you'll find interesting, and so will the other folks. Trish and I were out for a walk 2 or 3 days ago down by Cole Harbor, and we stopped by the front door of the Pan Pacific at Canada Place. And the bellman there was one of the folks I recognized because I work a lot in sightseeing and either in tour buses or in SUVs and passenger vans. I said hi, and I said, "How's it going?" And he said, "Oh, he had not worked since March. This was his second shift. He said there's only one bellman on him. The hotel maybe had 60 rooms, and most of them are all Canadian folks. So it's, wow. I mean, if you could have said to people years ago, there's going to be a day when tourism's just going to get the rug pulled out from under it, people wouldn't have believed you. I had to laugh at that clip on Global the other day of that immigration lawyer that's from Bellingham, and he apparently opened up a little bit of a business in Blaine, and he encouraged them to open something else, and someone said, "Well, what if the borders closed one day?" And everyone just laughed.
Yeah, that'll never happen.
Oh, it's happened, right? So
yeah, I think we look at this province, tourism, culture, and sports are by far the most impacted businesses in this province, and I think it's some kind of injection into them. I must say, though, I'm going up to Penticton in August to stay at the hotel there with one of the kids, and the other kids are coming up, and they're going to stay at a different hotel. They're older now, they got partners, and they want to stay in their own place. But it was hard getting a room up there, actually. I think when you get outside, the people we're forced to be tourists in our own province now, and I think that you're seeing a bit of a bump because of that. That all of us, those people who might have spent a lot of money outside the province, are now here spending their money. So I think it's a matter of how do you capture that, because a lot of tourism operators don't have a lot of money for marketing. They've relied on partnerships with, you know, in the case of, you know, say you guys, I'm sure with the shipping, the cruise ships being probably a big chunk, and all, you know, and just obviously Europeans understanding more remote kind of excursions would rely on guys like you guys. So you know, I think that there needs to be some kind of injection into the community to keep you guys alive, because we need you after this is over. And we need you right now. I mean, I think getting out and seeing our province and experiencing so much of what our province has to offer, it's a huge opportunity for you guys. And however the province and the cities can help you, they should be. So.
Yeah, well, it's just devastating, you know, to you know, almost none of the tour buses, the hop on, hop off, the regular tour coaches, the mini coaches, many of the vans, SUVs, they're parked, no plates, no insurance, and the owners are just like, oh my God, you know, most of these vehicles are newer. They've got monthly payments, you know, unless they bought them outright, which is unlikely. Those new highway coaches are about $600,000, $700,000. So anyway, somebody wrote in the chat there. Can you see that one?
Any thoughts as a marketer with government spending money to promote domestic tourism versus simply providing the cash to companies to stay afloat? Yeah, I mean, government is not generally very nimble when it comes to funding and working with the private sector, unfortunately. And I think that as an employer myself and as a small business owner, I think the federal government's initiative related to, you know, underwriting some of my staff costs was a really smart little move. I mean, there, you know, because a lot of companies, have seen this huge decline, and it's only short term, and you don't want to get rid of your staff. So any ways that the government can kind of just sneak in there and provide what's needed in that sector, whatever that sector might be, quickly and in a nimble way is crucial. I mean, nobody wants to fill out grant applications and this and that. I mean, I've gone through to BDC for some funding, and you know, the process is ridiculous. It's just like they keep asking me to resubmit, rewrite. I'm like, oh my God, I wrote everything you actually told me to write, and you say it's not enough. Like, so I think in these times of crisis, this is where government needs to be nimble and quick and make decisions. And that's why I'm disappointed in both the city governments for the most part, certainly Vancouver, and the provincial government. I don't see them stepping up in a speedy way for small business owners, and certainly I don't see anything that they provided the tourism and cultural sector. I have friends who work in the arts, and they are devastated. You know, dancers, there's nothing for them, nothing. They're trying to do stuff online and make money. They have no money. And in fact, some of the grants they've received, they have to give back because they weren't able to do the shows that they were meant to do. It seems insane, but they are writing checks back to the government because they couldn't achieve what they were meant to achieve because of COVID. So I hate government spending money, but I'm a Keynesian. I believe that when times are good, you save. You should not spend as much money. And when times are tough, you dig into your pocket and you start spending. And this is that time. This is the time when government needs to step up and provide whatever it is to make our economy keep rolling, and to help little guys, you know, like tourism operators, small businesses. These are the ones that are most affected and are the ones that really we rely on as citizens. Like everyday life, we go to our corner stores, we, you know, look to traveling around the province. If that starts to fall apart, then our whole economy starts to fall apart. And I don't see a lot of focus by the province or the city governments on this. Some cities are better than others, but certainly Vancouver has been very, very disappointing on this front. They're slow. Park board's decisions are ridiculous and slow, and cities' decisions on anything have been so slow. I don't understand why. When you look at other cities, made decisions really quick. Vancouver seems like, do you know there's a pandemic happening, you guys? Like, get to it.
Yeah, as far as the arts thing, what came to my mind recently is, you know, at Granville Island, to the right side as you face the Granville Island Hotel, you've got that Ron Bassford Park area. Right down almost at water level, there's a little bit of a stage, and the grass rises up. There's quite a mound of lawn that goes right up. It's like an amphitheater. And I was thinking, you know, they should fence that off and have the artists on the stage and charge people a nominal amount of money or whatever. And it's a good space to socially distance 6 feet from each other, sit down on the lawn and maybe
Yeah.
you could run some performances there. Of course, you wouldn't want things to run too late in the evening because some of the noise will carry across to the residence thing. But, you know, it's too bad there wasn't another type of theater somewhere like that, you know, because those are
Yeah.
good amphitheater type things. They're outdoors. You've got lots of good space. You know, that thing, I don't know how many people that thing holds, but let's say it holds 5,000. But if you only had 2,000 in there, everybody spaced apart, that would at
Yeah.
least be some way.
Yeah, I agree. I think outdoor events, we are all capable now of understanding what social distancing is. And you see it in the parks in our city already. People are sitting within distance. They're having a glass of wine, even though it's still not legal in the parks. That providing entertainment, as long as you can control the crowding, is a great way to, and if there's a way for them to get money for that, that would be helpful. So that's where the government needs to come in. If they're going to do a kind of entertainment in the city and provide cash to those artists, you know, how does that work, and why is that not happening yet? And it's not. So,
all right. Well, we're sounding like we're wrapping up here, and I do have one last question for you. At least I do. The future of George Affleck. Will you consider again running for the city, or somewhere in the future when your boys and girls are older and, you know, you've got a little more time, would you consider running provincially?
I certainly have been approached to run provincially. You know, that conversation exists, but I have not made any kind of decision on that. The next election is a year and a bit away, probably. So we'll see. And certainly, if not that, you know, a potential run for mayor in 2022 is certainly in the books. It could be happening. Could happen. You know, we'll see. We'll see.
We'll see what happens. Well, I'd rather see you stay in the city, because then at least you're not in Victoria where you have to be there, you know, a lot of days, and that's away from where you're, you know, like myself, you're born and raised in the city, and even though you lived in Langley, yeah, we'd like to keep you here. What was the other thing that was on the back of my mind there? Well, anyway, I just saw something go on in the chat. We'll just take a quick peek.
I see there my opinion on the parks board.
Yeah.
And
My question about the parks board is, sometimes they're such a frustrating group of people. I'm thinking, is it time to, you know, get those guys out there? I said
that on several occasions in the last few weeks. It doesn't make John Cooper happy, but, you know, we're buddies, and he's very passionate about the park board, but he's also very frustrated by some decisions that are being made lately. And certainly the tents is literally opening up our parks to, it's not even the arguments are bizarre to me on the whole tent one. The constitutional issue is not relevant. The decision was made in 2009. We've gone through several governments since then and not had to address that as an issue. And if it came up, we'd deal with it then. What we have done now is said, well, come into our parks and camp. The rule before was not discriminatory. Most parks closed at dusk. You had to leave. You weren't allowed to stay there. If you went with your girlfriend in your car to park and have fun time, you probably would get out of the park, you kids. That rule applied to all. It wasn't against anybody in particular. It was against all of us. But it was obviously something that was, you know, we measured process. But now you have this rule where we allow tenting in our parks, and they say for homeless, but how do you define that? What do you ask a person in the tent? I mean, of course they're staying in a tent. I'm homeless for tonight. You know, it makes it very, very, to permit something without actually having a strategy to deal with what the repercussion of that is, such bad governance in my mind. I mean, the engineering staff at City Hall, who Parks Board relies on for a lot of the work in the parks, are dumbfounded, I think, about, like, what do you want us to do now? Like, who's going to clean up these messes? Where is that? How's that work? There's no plan, and it's irresponsible governance, and wasn't necessary. And I think that we will see a further decline to our parks. Not to mention the fact that $30 million in debt for the year, and they have no plan at all that I've seen to deal with that. So park board is a mess. And I would say that somebody running a campaign saying dismantle the park board in 2022 could be an effective campaign.
Okay. All right. Well, George, thank you so very much. Everything worked out well this morning. You had another commitment, and we had a little glitch while you were doing that with our Zoom link. So we got it all straight, and it's been really great to get to meet you and find out a lot more about your background than I knew before. And so thank you so much. And I know we'd like to have you back at some future time. Normally we just hold monthly meetings in the winter time. The summer we all are so crazy busy. We barely have time to, I usually at the end of the summer come home to a stack of mail like this. It's just massive. And then you spend October, November. Oh, that came, did it? Oh, that came. And so it's been a weird summer and getting these meetings together. So, okay. If no one else has any questions, thank you so very much. You have my email address now.
Yeah.
And if you think there's something I should be aware of that you'd like me to share with the other tour guides and drivers, go ahead. And do you know Sandy James, by the way? She was a planner for a while at City Hall.
I know Sandy James. I don't think I've ever met Sandy James in person, but I certainly know Sandy James.
Yeah, okay, because she's another one that we were fascinated to learn about, and she seems real keen and so on. Well, anyway, then.
All right.
Yeah, thanks very much.
Thanks, everybody. Thanks very much. I really enjoyed it.
You're quite welcome. And for everyone else, if you just hang on for a minute, I have something I'll mention to you regarding the sea to sky. But anyway,
all
thanks,
right.
George.
Thanks. Take care. Good luck. Bye-bye.
Thank you so much. Yeah,
You're
bye-bye.
welcome. Bye.
Okay, so let's see here. We've still got about more than a dozen of us left online here. So I'm going to probably drive up with Trish and possibly one other person in my car on Thursday morning. I'll try to get there for 10 a.m. And, that sounds like a fun event. If you haven't stopped in for a while, if you want to make part of your trip, you can't go too early to the Britannia Beach and try the new cafe there, the Britannia Mine, but maybe on your way back out, that would be a good thing. I had something else on my head here, and it's gone out of my head, but it'll come back to me. You guys talk amongst yourselves.
Jeff, this is Jackie. I did hear back from Mike Hoyer. I emailed him earlier, the guy that was mentioned about the New West tours, walking tours, and he said we are doing two this Friday and Saturday, both at 10:30, and they're meeting in front of the Fraser River Discovery Center, about an hour and a half to 2 hours, about 3 kilometers walking max, casual and informative. And he said he'll decide on next week if the demand seems good to continue. So if anyone wants to know, I could forward this to them or whatever.
So this is a fella who's doing walking tours of the New Westminster waterfront?
Yeah, that Joanne mentioned earlier at the beginning of before we started the meeting. So I emailed him and he did reply. So as I say, this Friday, Saturday, unfortunately I can't do this week, but I'm going to ask if there's going to be in the future. I would certainly be interested.
Yeah, and he said on the neighborhood, the Sapperton neighborhood email, that if you've got 3 or 4 people, he'll set one up for you.
Okay, great. That's good to know. Thank you.
And he's getting good reviews. People seem to like his tours. So
okay, so I'm going to respond, but I just wanted to share that with everyone.
Can I jump in? This is the other Jackie. Is that a free tour?
yes.
Okay, I wonder if that would be something we could do as a group in August or September, if people are interested.
Oh, that's a thought too.
Jackie Wheeler, can you give out the date and time, start time again?
So he said, he said doing Friday, this week, Friday, July 24th, and Saturday, July 25th, both at 10:30. You know what, Jeff, I can forward this email to you. I'll send it by text if you want to share it.
Yeah, okay, 10:30
in front
a.m.
of the Fraser River Discovery Center.
Yeah, which is right beside, it's 10 feet away from the old public market, the Westminster Quay, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Is that Westminster Quay is still open and running, right?
Yes, it is. You can park under the hotel, but there's a lot of construction going down there. So the old parking lot that was like extended across the pier is blocked off.
All right. One thing that I can do if people are interested, I over the years created a kind of a very interesting walking tour of downtown Vancouver. We could meet, say, at the Vancouver block, which is opposite Nordstrom on Granville, just near Robson. And, you know, we end up walking down to the old Burke's building at the Burke's Clock, and we go into the Royal Bank. We move along to the Marine building and up Burrard Street and circle back around. There's quite a number of interesting things that many of you maybe had never noticed before. And whether or not it ever works for you on a tour, that's one thing, but at least it gives us another social aspect to get together and sort of say hi to each other in purpose instead of through the electronics here.
Jeff, it sounds like an architectural institute walking tour I did a few years ago, which was super interesting, but I'd certainly love to do it again because, you know, it's a reminder to us, and it never hurts to just have the information reinforced again. So yeah, I'd be interested.
It's not so much architectural, it's just pointing out a couple of different things, including architecture. Yeah, it's part of it. Yeah. And boy, I really feel badly for the arts people. I had forgotten that they're, you know, George reminded us again this morning, you know, there's just not lots for them to do. This is just, you know, I don't think hopefully none of us will live through this type of thing again. And anyone who's 15 or 20 years old right now, hopefully they never run through any, you know, some kind of a pandemic like this. It's when you look back at the 1918 pandemic and what happened there and what it did, and it's like, wow, it really did take almost 102 years for something that big to come along again. So, whatever the other topic was that was on my head, it's completely gone, but no big deal. We can communicate through the, you know, the Facebook pages and emails that Gary can send out and all this kind of stuff. So, I guess if nobody else has anything else, some of you we're going to see on Thursday. And I suppose if you're a bit late, don't worry about it. Don't, you know, drive on that highway, drive safely and take care getting up there. And I'm not sure how much walking I'll do on those trails up there, but it depends on how hot it is. Somebody this morning on my Facebook feed sent, or maybe it was on the CTGA, forget who, it was Lorraine. Lorraine sent a picture. She walked that one trail and you're on a wooden viewpoint and you're looking over the Howe Sound. I started on that trail a few months ago, but with a friend that was visiting in early March, but it was just too much snow on the ground and we couldn't negotiate. The pathway hadn't been properly cleared. Of course, that snow will all be gone now, so that's good.
So Jeff, this is Jackie again. If I can just jump in before I have to start driving again. I'll be sending out an email tonight, but in terms of scheduling and stuff on Thursday, we're actually going to have a presentation and an update from Sea to Sky at 11:30. So if that helps for people's planning purposes, that will be at 11:30, and they are going to offer us the ability to make reservations for lunch. So I'm going to send an email out later today to those who responded yes with all this information, but just an FYI, our presentation will be at 11:30.
Okay, I'm glad you mentioned that because someone asked me a day or two ago if they couldn't get up there right at 10, did it really matter? I said, well, probably not. But now they should at least try to be at the bottom by 11 so they can get up. Well, no, the presentation will probably happen at the bottom as well, at the base, right?
No, so that's why if anybody has questions, they should maybe just forward them to me, and the presentation is up top. So I'll send all this in an email tonight, and then I also want to get an idea of who's actually going to stay and eat something at the restaurant, and then we'll go from there. So I have to just continue driving right now, but for those who replied yes, I will send this out later this evening.
All right, and you said the presentation's at 11:30.
11:30, it'll be approximately a half hour. So, and this is going to be by somebody in their sales office, I believe. But again, that'll all be in the details in the email I'm going to send out to the yes people tonight. And it would be important to have, if somebody hasn't, Jeff, if you're aware of anybody who hasn't RSVP'd, if there's several, it's probably a good idea for them to RSVP so that I have a good accurate count, and also so that I can keep the restaurant updated somewhat, because they did want to know for planning purposes how many they might be able to expect for a meal or a snack or whatever.
Okay, and I know Resno's gone now. He had to leave the meeting about 20 minutes ago, but he has a van. I haven't asked Alfred, but if anyone needs a ride, depending on how many people need rides, Alfred does have a van. He might like I said, I haven't asked him, but he has a 14-passenger van, which I think is the same that Renzo has. Not that we want to fill it with 14 people, but if people need a ride and want to come along, either let me know now or send a text or an email.
Yeah, so that's already been kind of taken care of, I believe, for those who express needing a ride. But you know, again, it's all in the details that were sent out in the punch bowl invitation. Some people may not have hit the read more button, which brings you down to all the details. So I'll probably just repeat, copy and paste those again into my email tonight. And I'm sorry, I'm driving. I hope there's not background info, but I don't think there's too many people left on here.
Yeah, we're down to about 11. Okay, then, Jackie, we'll look for the email later tonight.
Okay, bye everybody. See you Thursday. Don't forget your masks.
Yeah.
Okay, bye-bye.
All right, bye for now.
Bye.
Yeah, and let's see here. Oh, here's a pic. I forgot to put this picture up earlier. This was at Spanish Banks Beach about a week ago. If you haven't gone for a walk out at Spanish Banks Beach, and I took the time for the first time in many years to cross the street from the bank, from Spanish Banks West, I think it was, and went into a part of Pacific Spirit Park. It's beautiful in there. Is if you walk in the trails at Stanley Park, there's people around, not many, but there's a lot less people if you're trying to avoid people at the Pacific Spirit Park. The park is broken up into 3 different sections, and the park part across from Spanish Banks is known as area number 3, and number of great trails in there. And the Admiralty Trail actually gets up high, and you overlook English Bay, and through the trees you can see a little bit of English Bay and a bit of the beach, Spanish Banks Beach, west, and so on. So great area if you're looking for places to go for a walk. That's another great area there. All right, I guess I'm going to hit leave meeting unless anyone has anything else. Otherwise, you can get me via text or email is a less intrusive way.
Bye, everyone. Have a good week.
Okie dokie. Take care, everybody.
Bye.
You take care. Be safe. Bye.
Yeah, ciao for now, everyone. Bye-bye.